Welcome to today's video. I want you to listen carefully to next story because you will hear things that will get stuck in your head. Let's begin. The rabbit hole of the dark web wasn't something I stumbled into by accident. It was a choice. A calculated risk born out of equal parts boredom and curiosity. The first time I downloaded Tor, it was just to see if all the horror stories were true. I wanted to prove to myself that the dark web wasn't some monster lurking beneath the surface, but just another corner of the internet filled with scammers, criminals, and urban legends. I had no idea what I was walking into. It started like any other late night, my room dimly lit by the bluish glow of my monitor. I was scrolling through forums and marketplaces, avoiding the darker corners where human misery was a currency, when I came across a link buried in a long thread about conspiracy theories. The title of the post caught my eye, "They Walk Among Us, Proof Hidden in Plain Sight." I clicked it. The page that loaded was stark. No graphics, no flashy text, just a single hyperlink in plain white font. Project Stargazer files. Beneath it, a warning: access comes at a cost. The truth isn't free. I knew better than to click blindly, but the temptation was too strong. My finger hovered over the trackpad as I wrestled with my instincts. Finally, I gave in. The link redirected me to a.onion site with an ominous countdown timer. 48 hours, 22 minutes and 37 seconds. Below it was an option to reserve access. It required payment in Bitcoin, naturally. The price wasn't astronomical, but it wasn't small either. About $300 in crypto. Curiosity tugged harder than caution. I transferred the funds and waited, my heart pounding as the confirmation message appeared. Your reservation is confirmed. Prepare yourself for the truth. When the countdown ended 2 days later, I received an encrypted message with a new link and a decryption key. Clicking it felt like stepping off a cliff. The site was unnervingly minimalist. A single file sat at the center of the page, labeled Project Stargazer, Restricted Clearance Level Omega. I downloaded it, every click making my skin crawl with unease. The file was massive, hundreds of documents, images, and videos zipped into a single folder. When I unzipped it, my screen filled with file names. Biological profiles. Subject hashtag A43-002. Reconnaissance reports, unidentified aerial phenomena. Human integration test result. Containment breach logs. At first, I thought it was a hoax. The documents were dense with military jargon and redactions, like someone's attempt at creating a believable sci-fi thriller. But as I skimmed through the first few reports, my skepticism wavered. The files detailed incidents spanning decades, strange craft sighted over remote regions, unexplained disappearances near military installations, and chilling references to non-terrestrial entities. One video stopped me cold. It was grainy black and white footage from what appeared to be a lab. A figure, humanoid but unmistakably not human, lay restrained on a steel table. Its limbs were elongated, its skin smooth and pale like porcelain. Its head was disproportionately large, with obsidian black eyes that reflected the harsh overhead light. Scientists moved around it, speaking in muffled tones, their faces obscured by masks. As the video played, the creature began to thrash, its movements violent and erratic. The audio cut out briefly before returning and the screen flickered. Then came the voice, low and guttural, speaking in a language I couldn't recognize. The scientists froze, their body language betraying panic. The footage ended abruptly, leaving me staring at a blank screen, my heart racing. I couldn't stop. I combed through the documents, piecing together fragments of a horrifying picture. These weren't just isolated incidents. According to the files, these beings, referred to as classified non-terrestrial entities or CNTEs, had been visiting Earth for decades. They weren't just studying us. They were infiltrating. One report detailed an event codenamed Harvest Protocol. The language was clinical, but the implications were anything but. Subject A43-002 exhibited advanced mimicry capabilities, integrating into human populations undetected for a period of 72 months. Primary objective: acquisition and extraction of viable genetic material. Secondary objective: Destabilization of host population systems. I leaned back in my chair, my head swimming. This wasn't just about aliens watching us. This was about them becoming us. The last file I opened wasn't a document or a video. It was a live feed. The screen flickered before displaying what looked like a surveillance camera view of a small, dimly lit room. A man sat at a desk, hunched over a stack of papers. His face was obscured, but the papers bore the same classified markings as the files I downloaded. Then he stopped. Slowly, he turned to face the camera as though he could see me watching. My breath caught in my throat. The man stood, moving closer to the camera. His face came into view. It was me. The feed cut to black. I froze, my chair creaking as I instinctively leaned back. The empty, black screen stared back at me like it knew something I didn't. My own face, distorted slightly by the grainy resolution of the feed, was burned into my mind. It couldn't have been real. 1,000 thoughts raced through my head, each one worse than the last. Was it a deepfake? A warning? I'd been careful, using a VPN, running everything through Tor, but suddenly, every measure I'd taken felt woefully inadequate. My email pinged. I jumped, my stomach nodding as I clicked over to the tab. It was a message from an address I didn't recognize, just a random string of characters. The subject line read, "We see you." I stared at it for what felt like an eternity before finally opening it. Inside was a single sentence. "You've gone too far." No threats, no demands, just those 4 words. My eyes darted to the clock. It was 3:12 a.m. My room suddenly felt too small, the walls too close. I turned off my monitor, my heart hammering in my chest as I scanned the dimly lit room. Every creak of the floorboards, every faint groan of the house settling felt amplified. I thought about unplugging my router, but something stopped me. A primal fear that it wouldn't matter, that they were already here. When I turned the monitor back on, the email was gone. Not just the email, the entire inbox. Every message, every folder wiped clean. My files? Gone too. The folders I'd downloaded, the screenshots I'd saved, they'd vanished as if they'd never existed. Even the link to the Project Stargazer site was dead, redirecting me to a generic error page. Panic set in. I scrambled to check everything, hard drives, cloud storage, even my phone. Nothing. It was as though the last few days had been erased. Except for one thing. My desktop wallpaper had changed. Where there had once been a photo of a sunset I'd taken years ago, there was now an image of the alien from the video, the one strapped to the table, its lifeless black eyes staring directly at the camera. A low hum filled the room. It wasn't coming from my speakers. It was deeper, resonating through the floor like the rumble of distant machinery. I stood, heart pounding, and peered out the window. The street outside was dark and empty, the glow of the streetlights casting long, eerie shadows. Then I saw it. A black van idling at the corner. The hum grew louder, almost deafening now, and my vision swam with panic. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket, startling me. I yanked it out and stared at the screen. Unknown caller. I didn't want to answer it, but my hand moved on its own, trembling as I pressed the green icon. I held the phone to my ear, listening to the static-filled silence on the other end. Then a voice. "Oh, come. You've been chosen." The call disconnected. Before I could even process what had just happened, the hum stopped. The van's headlights flicked off, leaving the street bathed in an unsettling darkness. And then the power in my house went out. My computer screen went black. The room plunged into silence, except for the sound of my front door creaking open. The front door creaked open, slow and deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't locked it, I'd been too consumed with what was on my screen. Now the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, all was silent again. But then came the sound, the faintest shuffle of footsteps on the hardwood floor, almost like someone, or something, was testing the space. I backed away from the desk, every muscle in my body screaming to run, but my feet refused to move. My thoughts raced to the alien in the footage, its body dissected, its lifeless eyes. But were they lifeless? What if it wasn't dead? What if everything I'd seen was just a fragment of something much bigger? The footsteps stopped. A faint glow lit the edges of the hallway outside my room, pulsing, unnatural. It wasn't the warm yellow light of a flashlight. This was cold, pale, and otherworldly, seeping under the crack in the door. I held my breath as the knob turned. Slowly, I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, an old, heavy lamp, and braced myself. The door creaked open, revealing the hallway bathed in that unnatural glow. There was no one there. No person, no figure. Just the light, emanating from nowhere. And then I heard it. A faint clicking sound, rhythmic and deliberate, like a cross between insect legs tapping and static crackling. It wasn't coming from the hall. It was behind me. I spun around and my breath left me in a sharp gasp. The alien. Not just like the one in the footage, it was the same one. Its mottled, grayish skin glistened faintly under the cold light, stretched taut over a lanky, impossibly thin frame. The large, obsidian eyes were anything but lifeless now. They reflected everything, the room, the light, me. It didn't move. It just stared, unblinking. I tried to scream, but my voice failed. The air around me felt thick, like trying to breathe underwater. My muscles were frozen as though whatever this thing was had latched onto my nervous system, holding me in place. The clicking grew louder, not from its mouth but its chest. The sound resonated from within it, like a language my brain wasn't equipped to understand. Then just like that, the paralysis broke. I stumbled backward, knocking over my chair, the lamp, anything to create distance between me and the thing. It didn't react. But then it moved, slowly raising a bony, clawed hand. It pointed to my computer screen, now flickering back on with impossible clarity. The footage returned. I wasn't in it this time. Instead, the screen showed a massive hangar-like structure, lined wall to wall with cylindrical glass pods. Each one contained something different, some filled with dark liquid, others glowing faintly with suspended bodies inside. Some pods were empty, shattered, or leaking thick, viscous fluid. I realized the camera was moving, gliding between rows of these things. My eyes locked onto the bodies inside. Not all of them were alien. Humans. Men, women, children, floating in those pods, some unconscious, others awake. Their faces twisted in silent screams as wires and tubes dug into their skin, pumping something to or from their bodies. The camera stopped at an open pod, wires dangling loosely, liquid pooling on the ground. I looked back at the alien. It hadn't moved, but its unblinking stare felt heavy, as though it were trying to force me to understand. The clicking stopped. Suddenly the screen changed. A live feed now, of something approaching Earth. At first it looked like a starry sky, but the stars were moving, clusters of lights, hundreds, no thousands of them, forming an incomprehensible shape. Ships. They were coming. The alien's hand dropped. Then I felt it, an intense, suffocating pressure in my head, like my brain was being squeezed from the inside. It wasn't pain. It was images, memories, flashes of places I didn't recognize, technology that didn't belong on this planet, and faces, alien, human, other. And a single, overwhelming message. They're already here. When I came to, the alien was gone. So was the light. But the message on my screen remained, scrawled in glowing text across the black background. You're part of this now. The message, you're part of this now, blinked on my screen as though mocking me. My body felt heavy, my mind fractured. What did it mean? Part of what? I stared at the screen, hoping for answers, but none came. My apartment was silent again, the alien gone as if it had never been there. The air felt stale and oppressive, and my thoughts churned in a growing spiral of paranoia. I needed to leave. Grabbing my jacket and phone, I bolted for the door, barely stopping to put on my shoes. I had to get out of there, clear my head, and figure out what to do next. As I stepped into the hallway, the world felt wrong. The shadows seemed longer, the fluorescent lights flickered more erratically, and the faint hum of the building's electrical system now felt like an invasive presence, alive and watching. I took the stairs two at a time, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the empty stairwell. The sound of my heartbeat pounded in my ears as I burst onto the street, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. But it didn't help. The paranoia clung to me like a second skin. Every passing car seemed to slow as it approached. Every person on the sidewalk looked just a little too interested in me. The streetlights cast shadows that didn't match their sources, bending unnaturally as though something unseen lurked just beyond their reach. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, the sudden brightness almost blinding in the dark. "Unknown number, we know where you are." I froze. My breath came in shallow gasps as I stared at the message, unable to comprehend how they'd found me so quickly. Before I could process it, another text arrived. "Unknown number, look up." I hesitated, my instincts screaming not to obey, but curiosity, or fear, overrode my caution. I slowly tilted my head. There, hovering in the night sky, was a single light. It wasn't a star or an airplane. It was too still, too deliberate. The light pulsed once, then split into two, then four, then dozens, spreading like a swarm of fireflies in the darkness. Each light seemed to move with purpose, descending, growing brighter as they approached. My phone buzzed again. "Unknown number, run." I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and sprinted, weaving through the streets, my mind racing as fast as my legs. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from the lights, the alien, the message. But the world wasn't letting me escape. Streetlights flickered and died as I passed, plunging entire blocks into darkness. The air was heavy with static, making my skin prickle and my ears ring. People I passed barely seemed to notice me, their faces blank, their movements mechanical. It was like the city itself was turning against me. I ducked into an alley, panting and clutching my knees. My chest burned, my legs felt like jelly, but I couldn't stop. The lights in the sky were growing brighter, closer, and I could feel them pressing down on me, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. Then I saw it. At the end of the alley, blocking my path, was a figure. It wasn't human, not entirely. Its body was sleek and metallic, its limbs elongated and jointed unnaturally. Its head was featureless, save for a single glowing orb where a face should be. I backed away, but before I could turn, another one appeared behind me, trapping me. My phone buzzed again. "Unknown number, you can't hide." The static in the air grew louder, almost deafening. My vision blurred as the two figures stepped closer, their movements precise and deliberate. I stumbled and fell, my back pressing against the cold brick wall. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive silence that followed. The two figures loomed over me, their glowing orbs casting an eerie light. One reached out, its metallic fingers impossibly delicate as they brushed against my temple. And then, nothing. When I woke up, I wasn't in the alley. I wasn't even sure I was on Earth. The room was sterile, bathed in a harsh white light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I was strapped to a table, my limbs immobilized, my head locked in place. Figures moved around me, more of those sleek, metallic creatures, their glowing orbs flickering in a pattern I couldn't decipher. I tried to scream, to thrash, but it was useless. My voice didn't work and my body refused to obey me. A screen descended from above, flickering to life. It showed Earth viewed from high above. The lights of cities dotted the surface like stars, but as I watched, they began to flicker and die, one by one. The screen zoomed in, focusing on a single city, my city. The streets were empty, the buildings dark. And then, in rapid succession, people began to appear on the screen. Not walking, not moving. Just standing, staring blankly at the sky. The last image the screen showed was my own face, staring up at me from the feed of a camera I couldn't see. The figures around me began to click, their movements synchronized as they worked on something I couldn't see. The pressure returned to my head, more intense this time, and I realized what was happening. They weren't just watching. They were controlling.